apologize for that. I made a motion without recognizing that it needed to be submitted to this committee in advance, so please pardon my breach of etiquette as I learn. The other was that I made a bad motion. I made a motion requesting that the PUAB recommend that we suspend shutoffs for families who are in school, as opposed to making a motion that we ask staff to investigate whether that was something that the school districts needed or wanted, and what the impact that would have been on processes for the utility. So please chalk that up to being a newbie and not knowing all the protocols at the beginning. So I will do my best to make better motions in the future. After the staff went and visited with the independent school district, they actually asked that not be extended because they felt like it would make it more difficult for families to come to school, and that instead we consider putting that on hold for reconsideration, and should the school district go back to full-time online, where that would be something that family hardship would need to be considered. So thank you for indulging me in that address. Mr. Porter.
Thank you, Bridget. It's fine. We're all learning here every day that we meet. Something new comes up. Don't feel bad at all. Okay, with that, I guess we'll go right into the discussion of the IPL strategic planning goals. And we'll have Mr. Nail present his, and then we'll ask questions and discuss what we think, okay? Unless anybody else has something else they want to say.
Mr. Porter, I'm sorry, with sitting behind you, I apologize. I'm not quite sure how to get your attention. I hope that we can take a moment to frame the conversation before we begin with the priorities, and just my understanding that the duties of the utility itself, the three utilities that we govern, are to ensure a well-staffed, well-maintained utility system that meets its regulatory requirements and the current and future needs of the community. And that the utilities have those important responsibilities for reliable quality service, for public health responsibilities, when you think of sewer and water especially, environmental responsibilities, and the ability to support local economic growth. And the PUAB itself has that job to think of itself entirely as a policy body, not a management body and not a management board. That means that we are responsible for promoting policies that make sense for the growth and continuation of a stable and reliable system, that they are consistently applied across the three utilities, that we have workplace policies that are reasonable across the industry with consistent application of those policies, that we keep an eye to future challenges and changes, that we pay attention to overall system performance and emergency preparedness. And that leads you to the point where you have a strategic plan, a thoughtful, deliberate, informed process that is made in collaboration with staff, with responsibilities of this body, and that collaborative document is informed by the multiple studies that have been engaged in the past. That should provide us with guideposts, timelines, and sequencing. And I hope that we are very thoughtful about taking the time we need, produce a document that we would be proud of, that would guide us for the next 3 to 5 years. And with that, I hope that we are willing to dedicate the time and energy it takes to make one that is workable for the staff and takes into account the important guidance that we've received from our multiple studies in the past. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Nail?
Mr. Chairman, board members, as Ms. McCandless said, put this to frame this so that we have an understanding of what we're trying to do and where we're trying to go. This list of priorities kind of follows on with the effort that Adam did 9 months, well, more than 9 months ago, almost 11 months ago, to provide a targeted list of priorities that that IPL staff could be directed to focus on to help get through some of the challenges that we had at the time. That process worked very well. We were able to accomplish to focus the staff and accomplish most of those goals over the last 11 months. So taking that in mind, looking at the inputs that we received from each of you, the discussions that we've had over the last couple of months, spending time with IPL staff members to look at what they saw as different challenges and priorities, as well as both the city analyst report and the study that we had commissioned through DKMT. All of those inputs combined to try to distill something down that would be a high-level targeted plan that, again, something we could hand to me and the IPL staff so that it would help direct our work over the coming months. With that in mind, like I said, I took the inputs that we had received from several of you, the one-on-one meetings that we had over the last couple of months, and kind of took those inputs and combined them into, instead of having 30 or 40 line items for you all to try to sort through, collected those into what I came up with was nine specific areas, and then grouped some of those as bullets underneath them. Each of these are an area that the IPL staff can directly affect, areas that they can focus their efforts on collaboratively as well as individually to help move this process forward. What we're asking from you all is, and again, you'll also have your own inputs that you want us to consider, but our goal is that that we would have something we could present that the PUAB would endorse to the council as a goals and objectives list for IPL. How you go about doing those priorities, I know Mr. Land submitted he provided a kind of a point system that you could consider. Other ways that the groups have done these is that each of you gets 10 points and you can assign those 10 points to the 9 items however you want, with 5 on your most important, and however you would like to do that. We would take all your inputs, distill those down, and then present back to you the final results showing where you as a body established or came up with those priorities. That we could present to the board next week at the regular scheduled meeting, and then from there craft you all could have a resolution or a recommendation then going to council to adopt that list. With that being said, I'm happy to take any questions that you might have about this list, how I came up with it, if you have questions about what some of these line items mean, and then you can continue the discussion as you see fit to establish your priorities.
Jim, first of all, I don't want to defend what I sent out. I was just trying to establish some criteria, and as opposed to us just kind of willy-nilly voting on something that was our favorite. I'm sorry. Just to go back and repeat what I just said. I don't want to necessarily defend what I sent out. I just wanted to establish some criteria. I was concerned that maybe we would just vote on our favorite one as a high priority, whatever, and just to open up a discussion point. As I thought about in looking at, and first of all, I want to compliment you in taking all of our input and structuring it around your 9. I think that was a difficult challenge for you. But as I looked at these, several questions came to my mind in terms of thinking through how do we prioritize. And so several questions I'd just kind of raise with you. I assume that some of these things you're already working on. And I think that would be helpful for us to know that we don't want to make up something a low priority. If you're already engaged in working on those, they ought to probably be a high priority because you've already invested some staff time, and maybe you're already down the road in working on this. Could you tell us on any of these that you're already working on some of these already?
Certainly. With working with the finance department, we are working on how to improve our procedures, our processes for FERC accounting. It is an important item. I mean, as we've noted several times, we've noted that our lack of data, or our lack of, I should say, our lack of consistent data, potentially cost us $2 million a year in possible revenue. So that is a high priority item for us, and the staff are working on with the finance department to help improve that as we.
And which, so that's number one.
Number one.
Okay.
In number two, CityWorks is an application or is a program that we have begun to implement within the not only within IPL but citywide. It has a lot of moving pieces to it, so that's one that we are in the process of implementing. We have dedicated staff not only within the city but within IPL as well that are working on developing those applications and helping to get the most benefit we can out of it. Again, that's an ongoing priority because we have to train, not only do we have to develop the applications, but we have to train the staff in how to use them, train all of our workers on how to provide the data that will make CityWorks as useful as possible. And then we also have to, additionally, once we have that data flowing, we have to develop applications that we can use to pull that data in for example, for budgeting purposes, for planning our capital improvements, looking at, for example, the tree trimming issue, identifying which circuits are causing us the most problem that are related to tree contacts, which circuits have the most maintenance right now that we could target for an undergrounding. CityWorks will help us do that, but we've got a lot of work to do to get it to that point. So that's one that's in process, but it does have a ways to go. The Ibew work agreement, number 3, we've got a signed copy of the new agreement. I have asked the staff to go through that and to identify areas in their particular areas where either the work rules are inefficient, the work rules are out of date, or there's other problems that we can improve to make our operation more effective, more efficient. That negotiation will not start until probably sometime after the first of the year, and I'll be working with Adam as we go forward on that.
And that was in the consultant report, as I remember.
Yes. In fact, that was both DKMT and Mark Toma Perry both identified that that's an area that we need to put some effort into.
So that would seem to be a high priority.
Yes.
Okay.
Again, the staff is already aware of it, and the staff is on their own are going through the existing agreement to identify some possible improvements. We'll have to collect those, prioritize them, and then obviously work with IBEW to iron out our differences. Number 4, the future generation resources. Obviously, this is one that's important to all of us because it has such a large impact on the direction that our operation is going to go. We are requesting, as much as we can do without engaging consultants, we are reaching out to groups like the APPA, American Public Power Association, the Missouri Public Utility Alliance, some of our neighbors that have already engaged in some of these construction projects, and just trying to gather what data we can, again, to help us when we do decide to reach out to put some kind of a proposal together. We'll have some of the background data already, but that's one that we can't afford to delay long because the clock is ticking on the 5 to 10 year window that our combustion turbines are available, as well as the 10-year agreement that we have with Oneta. And before we get too far down the road, we'll have to have something moving to figure out what our replacement plan is.
So can you tell us a little bit more in terms of, we can't delay it too long, and I understand that, but in terms of timing, Can you tell us a little bit more in terms of timing? Do we have 6 months, a year, 2 years? What do you project in terms of when we really have to?
Depending on which route we take, whether we go in-house with new generation that we own, or whether we look for new projects that we can partner with, or whether we stick with capacity and purchase agreements from outside of Independence, that will have a large impact on what the timeline is. If we decide that the way to go is for in-house generation to replace the combustion turbines, that's a multi-year process. It's going to take some time to develop what the new generation resource is going to be. You have the timing is going to be important for applying for permits. We do have some existing permits, but updating those and possibly depending on the scenario, if we need additional permits for an operation, it can take all year long to prepare the application and get that approved and get through that process. The construction itself can take a couple of years. It could be as much as a 5-year program to get generation actually to where it's ready to produce. So we're 2 years into our 5-year or 5 to 10 year window now. So the clock's ticking, if that's the direction that the city needs to go. If we decide that what we need is to continue with purchase power and capacity agreements, then just before the 10-year agreement with Onetta expires, we just have to be ready to move on what we would do to replace that. So a lot of the answer to that depends on which direction we end up recommending.
May I ask how you go about making that determination? I mean, that requires a very sophisticated actuarial analysis to sit down and do that, and how is that done?
We'll have to look at what we think is what are the pros and cons of the different scenarios. What's the benefit to having our own in-house generation? What's the benefit to going the cheap route and continue with, say, capacity agreements? We'll have to have some forecasts. As a lot of these older plants retire, the amount of excess capacity available on the market is going to decrease, which means the cost for that capacity is going to go up. Pretty much guaranteed that nothing's going to get cheaper. So we have to look at what are the forecasts, what do the actuaries say is likely to happen with those capacity costs. If there are purchase power agreements available that we could, like we have with Nebraska City and Iatan, what are the likely costs of those going forward? Those are all some forecasts that we'd have to get to help the city make that decision.
So we had a consultant report that addressed that issue, that we have that report in hand. Do you anticipate that in reviewing that report and updating it, that will be a staff review, or do you anticipate that will bring in other consultants to review?
We could take that report and then discuss as with this board and with staff, we can discuss what the pros and cons are. I don't think the relative costs aren't going to shift a lot. I wouldn't think, not in the short term. But you really have to have a discussion about the value. What is the value of having in-house generation? What's the value of participating in purchase power agreements or ownership agreements like Dogwood? What does that bring to the table besides just the dollars spent? There's reliability factors. There's the impact on outages and stability of the system. There's the different scenarios have different revenue opportunities. So there's more than just the dollar cost, and all of that will be important in that decision. Once we have a better idea of which direction we think we want to go, we could go out and get some better estimates for specific technology that would help us to fine-tune that decision.
And some of the items on here are not negotiable, like succession planning. We could choose to make that low priority, and it really doesn't matter. As you have people who are going to age out and retire, they're going to require replacement anyway. So I struggle a little bit with process for how I pick my favorites, as opposed to figuring out which ones are required, which ones are optional, and which ones require decision tree that involves us. Because some of these are decisions that are entirely up to the management of IPL. So I hope that as we go through, you'll be sure to give us input on, some of these really have to happen regardless.
Certainly. As far as the succession planning goes, we do have several positions that the incumbents are aging out. Our meter shop, the meter shop foreman and both technicians could go any day they decide to want to go. Our substation crew, I think half of our substation crew is eligible to retire as we speak, including the supervisor. So our system operators, the folks that 24/7 run our distribution system, out of the 5, I believe 3 of them are eligible to retire. The training is the issue, or part of the issue. How do we get somebody in time to start the training? If we don't have a position in our table of organization that's funded for us to hire. In most cases, we hire somebody to replace somebody as they leave. We begin the process either immediately prior or just after the person's actually gone. For some of these positions, that will put us in a bind. So we have to look at, and we have to work with our HR and finance staff to figure out, how do we do that? How do we manage that process so that we can get the right people or provide for a training pipeline to have them ready and eliminate some of those gaps?
And most large companies have a line item in their personnel that says transition planning, and that allows them that overlap period where they have 2 people who have the same job title during that training phase. So I'm sure, and I recognize that is not without cost, but the complications of not addressing that are profound and will cost you more in the long
Certainly.
run. So.
Well, and for example, the system operators, the training for that system operator takes about a year. So if we hire somebody that does not already have the certification, it's going to take about a year to possibly a year and a half to where they can actually be certified and do the job unsupervised. That's a long time to double up a position. But like I said, that's something we'll have to work with HR and finance to figure out how the best way to accomplish that.
Jim,
Yes.
I don't know, I know the new members don't have it, but some of the older members on this board, on the CTs, my first meeting here was about CTs. I didn't know what you were talking about. But good Lord, we talked about them every meeting after that and have done nothing to them. We had Burns and McDonald come in, we paid them a stupid amount of money to tell us what needed to be done with them. So here we are doing it again. What I'm saying is, if you check back in your notes, they'll tell you what needs to be done. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is that right, Mark?
Well, Burns and McDonald gave us a list of options. We could replace the combustion turbines. We could continue to maintain them at ever-increasing maintenance costs. We could replace them with newer, more efficient technology. We could, or as they laid out in their report, we could stick with, or we could go a shift to capacity arrangements, purchase power agreements. They laid out the options and they laid out the costs for those. They did not make a recommendation of which one they thought was the best. They just laid it out as in terms of what's the cheapest to the most expensive.
Well, what I'm getting at is they laid out that, and we as a board, I remember voting that we needed to get rid of them. The ones that were high maintenance or high repair. Yet we've done nothing, and here we are addressing them again. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. This is a Public Utilities Advisory Board. But every time we come to a meeting, it turns out to be an IPL board. Because that's apparently the only thing we care about. But we put everything off. We've said, okay, we'll take that under advisement. And next thing you know, we're on something else. I want some finalization saying we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and that's it. And that's what needs to be done. Because if we're going to sit here, and we might as well come up with a new board for the IPL and then another board for water and water pollution control. Or what is it now, the Public Works?
I assure you, I have a sense of urgency about this generation issue, and Councilman Huff has made the comment several times that over the years this has been a can that's gotten kicked down the road time after time after time. Now we're to the point where we've got to make a decision and we've got to move forward with whatever plan the city decides to adopt. I will certainly work with you to help shape that recommendation. But there are it is a serious question that has a lot of implications both for the reliability of our system as well as the cost.
And that's what I'm saying. We've made decisions on. We had another Burns and McDonald come in and told us, no, you're going to have to raise your rates to 17 or 13% or some outrageous figure, and then our city people come up with you could reduce it by 6%. And exactly 2 months after they told us we had to raise it, Burns McDonald says, "Oh yeah, you can lower it."
Burns McDonald's original,
and then they said, "No, you don't want to do it right now." Yeah, you do it because it's like I said at that meeting. If you don't try something different, you're not going to get a different result. And we need a different result because we're losing money on the CTs as far as I'm concerned. Every time you have, having 17 people?
Yes, sir.
To run one?
No, to run 6.
6, I mean. That's a good job. Anyway.
With 4
And that's my concern is I think we need to get something done as soon as possible.
Oh, I understand. And Burns and McDonald, I mean, everyone needs to understand when Burns and McDonald came in to do that study and made that recommendation, it was based on the scenario we gave them. And essentially, if nothing changes, if Power and Light continues as it is right now and nothing changes, here's the impact to your revenue. We all see the declining revenues, the increasing costs, and in order to accommodate that, you would have to have a rate increase.
Well, it was prior to your taking over the Power and Light, but what I'm saying is yeah, that's exactly what you did. You went to Burns and McDonald and said, yeah, this is what we want, and they did what you wanted. They did what management wanted. They didn't do anything to help the customer. They didn't say, well, this is what the Public Utilities Advisory Board wants. This is what the city staff wants. Well, we as a board, we don't want that anymore. We want what we want to do for the ratepayer and all the utilities out here. Now you can continue.
Under number 5, several members of the board have asked a number of times about potential rate reductions. What I put into this for your consideration is, and it's the next to the last bullet on number 5, is to provide for an annual review to evaluate the potential for excess funds and the most appropriate means to benefit the ratepayers. And the reason I phrased it that way is the right answer this year might be, or next year might be a rate change, or it might be a rebate. If we have a particularly good year, that doesn't mean the rate's wrong. It's just some other factor, whether that's fuel costs were down, our revenue, we had unexpected opportunities to collect revenue. For whatever reason, a year might be a good year. The next year might be the opposite. So if we evaluate it on a year-to-year basis, if we think we have an appropriate rate for the way we're set up, then let the rate stabilize. We can plan out 3, 4, 5 years, continue to make our revenue projections, base our budget off of those revenue projections. And then if we do have a good year, possibility would be that we look and say that, based on all of our financial analysis, we've got $10 million above and beyond what we need for our cash reserves. The decision might be that instead of tweaking the rate for that one good year, maybe the answer is you issue a rebate to the customers and return, because what the charter says to return the excess to the ratepayers. It doesn't say change the rates. It says return the excess. And the best, from year to year, the best answer might be a rebate. So instead of having a goal of specifically targeting the rate itself, and maybe I propose that the answer might be look at how we can best serve the ratepayers from year to year. And it's going to change from year to year.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
I want to say thank you for your comments just now. I don't know in all of the history of IPL how many times IPL has actually either reduced rates or given back to the ratepayers. And that's where I think we find ourselves in a situation where our rates are so high that our city manager in a public meeting can say, we're not going to adjust rates for 5 years. We're not going to have to raise rates for 5 years. Well, in reality, if it was being properly budgeted and properly handled, we'd be looking at it on an annual basis. And yes, some years we would be given a rebate. Some years we may have to actually increase rates. But the way we've done it now, or done it for, gosh dang it, I forget when we had those 3 big rate increases, how many years ago that
I think it was between 2009, 2012. I think
Okay.
12 was the last one.
The idea of following the charter and giving back to the ratepayers has been non-existent. And I think we all know it. And I think part of the issue is we built budgets. So what we need or what we want, and then whatever that is, plus making sure we got our pilot, then that's where the rates fall. We're doing it backwards. And I hope that one of the priorities that I put in there is kind of different from what you're saying, but I do applaud you for that. Do we know when we're going to get that cash, Adam, when we're going to get that cash report on how we're doing on reserves and what is available to give back to the ratepayers?
PFM is scheduled to brief you all next Thursday.
Who?
Our advisor, our
company?
financial advisor, PFM, is scheduled to present this to you. They came and presented to this board. I forget when that was, a few months ago.
Yeah, you
and
gave
they're scheduled to come back.
encouraging news the other day. So
Yeah.
I'm
So
just
they're
hoping.
they're scheduled to come back on Thursday, next Thursday at your regular meeting
Oh,
for
okay.
presentation.
And the other thing that, and I don't know how we're going to do this, but I think we're getting bogged down in the weeds or the grass or whatever you want to call it. I think that at some point we need to try and score these so that we have a better idea. And if we want to use, I was talking to Garland before the meeting, and I think Garland's spreadsheet makes good sense. I think in addition to what Jim has put together, I also submitted one basically taking what Jim put together and took several things off. My list ended up with 6 issues versus 9, and I expanded on some of the things that I thought was important. And if people score it and they don't think it's important, that's fine too. But I think us going through each one and laying it out for what we're going to do in 5 years and what have you, I think we're going to be here till midnight.
Mr. Land had asked for an explanation of which ones we were working on, so I was just trying to give you all a picture of that.
And I applaud you that we need to be working on it. And I think the doctor's comments earlier, I thought were very well put. I would move that as soon as we get done with IPL on their budget, on their prioritization, we need to do the same thing for WPC, and we need to do the same thing for the water department. We don't have that continuity, and I think we as a board have been spoon-fed or whatever, but we need to be much more active in the policy making or advisement to the city council. So next week we'll know what that amount of money is, and then maybe we can advise the city council, maybe providing some kind of relief to the ratepayers, which is wonderful. But anyway, that's my suggestion, that we do something to be able to score this thing out, because even though you're going through it, it's very enlightening and very entertaining. I think we need to get off ground zero.
No, I think this has been helpful to know exactly what.
Certainly. And
Go ahead, continue.
the rest of those items are things that we've discussed with staff. We don't really have anything yet in place to address them, but I've told the staff that these are areas that we need to do better in, as far as the data-driven maintenance decisions, data-driven capital improvement decisions. Excellent recommendation that Jack provided for looking at reduced tree trimming by moving more circuits underground, and doing that based on our storm data, maintenance data. Certainly that's an area that we can work on, and we're just now beginning the budget process for next year. That's one of the goals I've given our T&D and tree trimming group, is to look at that, see what information we have, and can we use that to make some of those decisions.
Does that require additional resources to put your lines underground?
It really just requires using the resources we've got, like CityWorks. CityWorks will have, assuming the data has been put in, CityWorks, you can search CityWorks and find out how many storm-related outages did we have. How many of those were because of tree contacts? How many parts of town, we have like a 5-year trimming cycle to go around and keep everything in order. What areas do we have to go back more often? What areas are growing faster than what our trim cycle accounts for? And are those areas that would be appropriate to target? Do we have parts of town that are already partially undergrounded that we could finish the process? All of that is data we can use CityWorks to help us review, and then take a look at what those costs are and put appropriate amounts in both our operating budget and our capital improvement budget. Unless you have any questions about any specific items, that would kind of give you a picture of what we've already started working on and kind of what our thought process is.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jim. I again applaud you and Adam both for the hard work you put in on this, and listening to us, and we appreciate it. But we still have, as you know, some concerns, and we'll address them, and I'm sure we will. Is there any other comments from the committee?
Dave.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
Chair with me here.
Yeah, Jack.
I have a question regarding the listing of objectives under number 8.
Okay.
Both our group and the council have struggled for quite some time now regarding the responsibilities of the city charter and the Bondurant decision. And those are bulleted there, third bullet down in number 8. I believe the city charter is fairly clear, but both groups obviously have a different view of what the Bondurant decision says and is supposed to mean. I'm just wondering, I'm asking the city what path we would take to get clarity on the Bondurant decision.
Sarah, I think that's a question for you.
I think that question definitely came up earlier this spring, maybe last fall, and the city attorney was going to provide that for you guys. But I can definitely check with her on where that is. If we, everything kind of fell apart in February, so things kind of got pushed aside a little bit. So
Would that be up to you to do it, or do you want me to call her and ask?
I have communication with the city attorney, so I can ask.
I'd like to interject a thought here.
Like to hear what?
Both parties seem to have differing opinions on the Bondurant decision. When one party has the attorneys making the decision, I would much rather see an independent making that decision rather than a representative from one of the groups that don't agree.
And I think that we ought to.
Turn on your mic.
I'm sorry. I think that if we're going to, I agree that's a constant problem. And in defining the answer to that, I think that we ought to phrase the questions that ought to be answered very specifically. I don't think we ought to just say we want a lawyer to address the Bondurant decision and without addressing specific questions. I think we have enough real life questions that have come up that as a PUAB, we ought to come up with very specific questions that we ought to ask a lawyer to address. Otherwise, we may not come back with a satisfactory review of what we're wanting.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Mark.
just my 2 cents on it, because Jack didn't get, I don't think Jack got a copy of what I submitted. My first priority, the top priority, is to officially address the operating relationship between Independence Power and Light and the City of Independence, Missouri, specifically the March 12, 1980 Bondurant decision and the City of Independence City Charter. Our city deserves the transparency and integrity of resolving this point of contention. And I totally agree with Jack. I think it needs to be to an arbitrator or another judge or someone without having to sue the city, which I think is sad that someone said that we have to sue the city in order to get a clarification on that. And I also think the question is the Bondurant decision a valid document or is it not? It's not. Let me ask you a scenario, and I have a question on that. Is the Bondurant decision accurate as it's written, and is it outdated and doesn't make any sense anymore? I don't know how a judgment goes away. That's my point. Does that help Jack at all?
It does. I kind of agree with both of the speakers here on that. I realize the city's in a tough position. Our main conflict has been the street lighting. And there's some others, but none as significant as that. I know the city will struggle with expenses and would hold steadfast into not wanting to pay for those expenses. I can understand that. But if the Bondurant decision is the way that the board sees it, there needs to be a comfortable way for the city to approach the street lighting costs.
Adam?
Yes, sir. Thank you. I agree that this court case and varying interpretations of the city charter. In my short time involved with the utilities here in this board, it is something that comes up quite frequently. What I would suggest as far as that specific process goes, that if that becomes one of the higher priorities, once this all shakes out and that gets presented to this board, then we would work with you all on what that process looks like to determine what that case means, what is involved in that with the charter and all those things. So I think if it becomes a priority, which my guess is it likely would be one of the higher priorities, then we would work with you all on what that process looks like, what all that entails, the questions that need to be asked, that type of thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. Jack, are you through for a minute?
Yes, sir, go ahead.
I've discussed this with a lot of people in the Bondurant decision. I'm looking at the city charter, which I got a copy right here if you want to read it. I see it's a court decision. There's been no appeal to it. Nobody's reversed it or anything. But instead of reading the Bondurant decision, we read the city charter. And we go up to another section that says, well, it says here you can loan money to another entity in the city if you pay it back in the next fiscal year. Well, I don't know. The last one was I got two councilmen sitting there. Was 2.5 million that they took out of the Power and Light Fund? 25 million?
They didn't take it out, they authorized it.
They authorized it.
They didn't take that much out.
They haven't used it. They gave some. They used the money for the federal government for the CSL. Is that right?
Yeah.
So we haven't touched it.
Yeah.
But there's been other times that there's been money. The cars that we bought, how many? 7? I don't know how many of them have been paid for yet, but yet we see it every time on our financial report in lieu of taxes. Well, it's not lieu in taxes. We tax it anyway, and I don't see any change in that amount of money ever. We've not paid anything off on it. Is it a lease program? Are we going into the car leasing program or something? I don't know. But to me, it's the way we interpret the city charter as opposed to interpreting the Bondurant decision. The Bondurant decision is very clear. It's simple as that. But the city charter is not that clear. It doesn't say enterprise funds cannot do this. It says that if you do this, to any power and light or public works or any of them loan money to them, you have to pay it back. It has to be distinguished in the city charter. But I still would like to, with the rest of them, have a final note on it and get it out of the way from an outside source. And if it's priority, Adam, like you said, we'll start the groundwork and get it done and get somebody in here to tell us what needs to be done with the charter or the Bondurant decision. And that's my opinion on it at this time. Jack, do you have anything else on that?
Well, just be careful how deep we get into it. I agree with everything you said. The Bondurant decision, though, has wording in there that says anything that is not part of providing electricity to the residents of Independence is inappropriate to use for anything else other than power and light uses.
That's what I'm saying.
You can interpret that any other way.
And that's what I'm saying. The Bondurant decision is very clear. But then we have our staff, some of our staff, and some of our, well, I don't want to name names, interpret it a different way.
Well, it's important
from the city charter. Huh?
I said it's important because it's a lot of money. But if we're looking on the efficiency of the utility, it must be approached.
Correct. Okay. Anybody else?
Well, if we're getting back to setting priorities, I'm sorry. I'm still concerned how we're going to set priorities. Everything that I've heard is everything's a high priority. And and I appreciate that. Everything on this list is very important. And I don't know how we whittle this down to saying some things are less important than others I mean, some of it is in terms of timing of how when do you address something sooner than something else. I think everything on this list is good and is important. I don't think we all provide our input, and and you had your input. I don't think there's anything we say is unimportant, but I'm really struggling with how do we say that is this to be a 1-year plan, a 3-year plan, a 5-year plan? Do we have any direction from what do you envision, Jim, in terms of how you see this as a plan?
I would say this gives the IPL staff direction for a good 3 to 5 years. Some of the stuff is going to happen faster than that. Some of the items are more of a long-term process, but I think it gives us good direction that we can use to make some of those longer-term decisions. I can tell you that regardless of the priorities, different IPL staff members will be addressing these things. The question comes down to, if it comes down to a question of time and resources, we would shift those to the higher priority items. But that doesn't mean the other items will be forgotten. We'll focus first on the ones that are the highest priority.
So I guess is it important for you that we set the priorities? Or is it more important that we direct you back to set a timeline for each one of these as a staff, that you provide a timeline for each one of these, and you bring back to us the timeline for our review? I mean, I think that would be a more helpful process, that we review your recommendation to us as a timeline. And if we think there ought to be an adjustment to that timeline for any one of these, then we can have that discussion. But I'm challenged to set a priority saying this is more important than that, because I think they're all important, but I think which one of these things you're already working on, and because some of the things you're working on now, but it may take 2 years, and some of these things you're working on now, but you're going to get done in 2 months' time. But if you would tell us, this one we're going to start on this date, and we expect to have it done by this date, that would be helpful for us to see.
And Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
the other thing that I think would be helpful is if you think of that as your timeline spreadsheets with the various activities, are there ones that require particular resources? So a legal opinion, financial infusion, new line item in the budget, those resources that would be required, I think, will also help us to be able to figure out how we support you in that work.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I don't know how many of you had a chance to review Mark McDonald's recommendations. I know that we're talking about IPL's recommendations, and some of theirs are already in the works. They're working on them. But after comparing the two, there's no question that this is really well thought out. And if you haven't seen it, you need to take a look at it. Even though you're working on some of your items already, the clarification on the governments is number one. And that needs to be addressed. It's something that I've only been here for a couple months, but it seems like we're just dancing around it and not addressing it. And I don't care who has to make the decision. It needs to be an independent party. But it needs to be addressed, because it seems that is our biggest problem. Now, the other items for the future, yes. Policies, yes. But we shouldn't dance around this anymore. And Mark, this is a beautiful document. If you all haven't read it, you need to read through it. In fact, would it be out of order for Mark to read this so it's in the record?
Christine will get a copy of it. It'll be in the record.
Can you say that again?
Huh?
I couldn't hear you. Can you say that again, please?
Do you have a copy of this yet?
Yes.
All right, it's in the record. Right.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Jack Looney here.
Yeah, Jack.
I like the idea of having a checklist of objectives and costs and those type of things, as was recommended earlier by one of our board members. I can't help but think that there's a number of things that might determine priority. I'm going to suggest that one thing is items that make the most financial impact as immediately as possible. For instance, as you know, I'm a proponent of the underground program, but the tree trimming cost is one of the higher costs of the Power and Light budget each year. I think that causes that, and I think it's afoot already, but I think that causes that to come to the upper end of the list. And anything else that might have a large financial impact, I think deserves immediate attention. The other thing I caution against, and again, it's speculation, but when we talk about our future generation, with administration at its highest level, perhaps changing to a more green attitude, we've got to be very careful what considerations we make towards future generations. It may be that our decisions might not be compliant with the thoughts of the future leaders. I'll conclude with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Well, I don't want to sit here all afternoon and everybody prioritize what they want. I'd like to have that emotion on there.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
going back to Mark's list here, number 3 should be probably right behind number 1. Develop a systematic approach of cost reduction. Comparison of salaries. I mean, I look at this and as an outsider, I'm thinking, are we paying too much since we're the second highest utility within 50 miles of this location? There's a problem there. We're doing something definitely wrong. Comparison of salaries and benefits for the employees and management with similar type utilities. These are things that need to be addressed. I mean, and as far as I'm concerned, push them up as high as you can. I like the idea that Mr. Garland is wanting to do as far as rating these. I think we ought to take both lists, put them out to all of us, and let us rate these and bring it back. And we should be able to do that in a week's time before our next meeting. I mean, if nobody at the city staff wants to do it, I'll be more than happy to sit down and put it in a computer and create a spreadsheet and send it out to everybody. I mean, there's no excuse to push this off any farther.
That's exactly what I was going to say, David. I was going to say that we don't need to be discussing our priorities today. We need to go to a list and prioritize them, rate them the way we want, and bring it back to our regular meeting on the 19th. Is that everybody's thought? I hope.
Can we make a motion to that effect?
Yes.
So moved.
Second.
Motion been made to make a priority list. Is there any, David, do you want to make up a score sheet?
I'll be more than happy to take Mr. Knoll's list, Mr. Garland's list, Mr. McDonald's list. I will put them into a spreadsheet and send it out to everybody. Or I'll send it to you. I know the meeting's long. I'll send it to you and you can send it out You can clean it up if I've made mistakes. I'll do my best to have it to you by Saturday or Sunday. So you can make sure everybody has it over the weekend.
Okay,
Will that work?
That's it.
Oh, yes, sir.
Adam?
I appreciate the offer, Mr. McDowell, but I certainly believe we're more than capable of doing that, and it seems appropriate that whatever scoring sheet needs to be developed, we can do that and get that to the board. So if everyone's comfortable with that, but we would need the criteria that you want to use. In my mind, when we put this list together, and it's not clear to me which list we're actually using right now, but what I was assuming was something like each board member in a typical strategic planning process, you get 3 or 4 points, and you assign those points to each one of these areas. You can assign all your points to one area if that's a priority for you. You assign 2, you assign whatever you want. And then we bring that back to you all. That was what I envisioned, but certainly this is your process here. We're here to support you through that process.
I'd rather the city would put it out, David.
I don't have a problem with that. You've got 3 sheets right here from 3 different people. Just put them in a spreadsheet and send them out. Have 4 boxes where we can rate them 1 through 4.
So what I would
1 through 3, I'm sorry.
Well, but one's just one's how a mechanism guide for how to rate, and the other 2 are documents
Okay,
related to
just the 2
priorities.
documents. I stand corrected.
Just 2 documents, yeah.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Ned. Adam?
Chaplain,
Jack?
would it be possible for the city to attach potentially achievable savings from each one of these categories that be proposed?
I don't think that. Go ahead.
not by tomorrow. If we want to get the spreadsheet out, and
Let's just stick with the spreadsheet.
I think it's important in the decision making now, sir.
Well, we've been on the board and we got a lot of information that I got that shows me the savings and the spending. I think we can refer to our own file. I got a whole cabinet full of papers that they've told me how much we've lost and how much we've gained and how much they don't have me on there any place to give me any money. Go ahead.
Just to help Jack, for me and Jack to understand each other, I don't think it's possible to put a value on some of the things. I totally agree, like the tree trimming thing you were talking about. Some of these things, I don't know that you can just off the top come up with a value to associate with it, whether it be your work with Ibew. I don't think it would be, when we're looking at systematic rate setting, I don't think any of those things would have values. They'd have benefits later on, but I don't know how you could put them in a listing and say, this would be the highest impact economically, and then on down the list. So I don't know that would be appropriate.
So thinking on the fly here a little bit, okay? 2 things. I think we have two lists here. If this board is going to evaluate priorities, we need to reconcile these 2 lists.
Because I see there's overlap in them.
There is overlap. So if we merge these 2 documents together, and quite honestly, I mean, we attempted to do that to the extent we did, but maybe we didn't fully hit those objectives here. So what I would suggest is, first, we use one of these lists, and my suggestion maybe start with what was in your packet, and if there's something that needs to be moved over to this list, then we do that, or if something needs to come off this list, we do that too. Or if language needs to change, and then we will send this list out. And you all prioritize those things. as a document as a whole, if this is fully endorsed by the board as a whole, all these items are things that want to be pursued, then the entire document can be endorsed and recommended to the city council. But we would place a higher priority on those items that were top 3, for instance. But all those things, we don't want that good work to get lost. I mean, we spent time with you all. You took time out of your day to meet with us. We don't want that work to get lost. So if, as a whole, if the plan is supported by you all and reflects what this board wants to see done, then you can endorse the entire plan, and then we'll just focus initially, at least, on those 3 priorities. But much like what we did when I first came on the team here, we will work those other items if they're endorsed by the board and the city council in tangent. At the same time, these other things are going on. We would just focus more time and energy and resources on those things that are pressing. Does that make sense?
So I'm not clear if we're prioritizing the 9 or if we're prioritizing the 41.
Thank you.
So the idea would be to prioritize the 9 or whatever the final list is, not the 41.
Okay.
That would kind of water things down to. That's my recommendation to you all. Okay, that's your choice though, but that would be my recommendation.
Because I think Mark's ideas are incorporated in the 9. I don't think we have to. I didn't have time to actually review Mark's doc because we just saw it this morning or this afternoon. But and you can review it more carefully, Mark, and see if there's something that didn't get into the 9. And you could probably tell them if something's missing. But my guess is that the 9 encompasses everything that Mark has on his list. So if we're but your recommendation is that we're prioritizing the 9, which simplifies our process as opposed to all 41 dot points.
I would recommend you prioritize whatever list this board endorses. Okay, so we came up with a list of 9 things.
Mm-hmm.
They're not numbered in order of priority for us. That's just how they were developed.
Yeah.
If there's something on this list that we missed, Mr. McDonald's list that we missed that's not in here, then I would suggest we reconcile that now. Okay? Then we send this, whatever list we come up with here, out to the board. You all have till, we give you a spreadsheet, we give you 3 or 4 points, prioritize, what you want out of here. We score that and bring it back to you all next week.
Well,
and then you would endorse the entire plan in theory, and we would know what the top ranking priorities were. So if there are items here, Mr. McDonald, that need to be incorporated here, then I would recommend we work through that right now, and then we have a plan and priorities that this board can then assess and come back and make a recommendation next week.
May I ask, Mr. McDonald, was your intent to do it in order of what you thought was most important, or some of your wording was more pointed on yours than on the city's version? So I just am trying to understand the priorities that you put forward. What was your intent?
Let me explain what mine is. Mine is basically taking the 9
Right.
and incorporating what I believe to be the more important issues. There's several things that I think should be handled at the local level, whether it be you'll see, and you probably need to see both of them. One is about negotiations. Another one is about the clarifying governance. Clarifying governance, I just put is number 1, is the most important to me,
Okay.
and I clarified which issue needed to be addressed. I believe that it was really put, the emphasis was not there. It wasn't to the level that the Bondurant versus the city charter importance was. And I did that for all the issues. One thing that's really missing in this document is any real discussion about rate setting. for some reason I know I submitted something that said something very specifically about rate setting. And this final product of 9, I think it was listed, you brought it up. It's in a bullet point, next to the last bullet point under 5. It says provide the annual reviews to evaluate potential of excess funds and the most appropriate. It's in there, but it doesn't have near the level of significance that I think I would hope our board would be trying to highlight. And I don't agree that we should be giving them a laundry list of 70 items or like the strategic plan for the city. That's just a huge numeration so that we can say we got a lot of stuff done. I think it's more important that they handle a few things and then get that taken care of. And then we do the process again to see if there's problems with what we've done. Cost reduction thing, I can assure you mine was, I expanded on what the city had, Mr. Nails had put together. There was a real emphasis to go on one particular employee type. Let's about and I'm missing it in my head. It was talking about complaints. Oh, here it is. It's very clear that number 6 is related to the question of AMI and whether we should have AMI or not. I could care less whether we have AMI or we don't have AMI, but there's far more issues from what we've seen in the Toma Perry report and the DKMT report that would say that all employee types need to be looked at, whether it's not just the meter readers. We need to be looking at management levels. We need to be looking at for the whole thing. So what I did on that one was actually expand on it. So yeah, I went through each one of them and I said, does this make sense? Is this a real priority? A high level enough that a board of governors, which the city council is for IPL or for the utilities, and we're advising them for what they should be looking at, or what we believe are the most critical things to look at. And that's what this thing is that I put together, is actually going through this, putting a priority list on it, and incorporating Jack's specific. Jack Looney's is number 6 on here, but that is exactly what was in this report. So some of the things didn't change at all. Some of them were eliminated because I thought that they were things that Mr. Neal is working on. And I don't know that was important to be presenting to the city council as a priority. It's an everyday, and I don't welcome your job that you have every day, but that's something that he's working on. I think he's going to do fine. So that's how this document got created. Any other questions?
I don't have any questions. I just want to say that I would really like to see us, we're doing a lot of discussion. I'd like to see it simplified. All board members should have a copy of Mark's recommendations. Do you?
Yeah, everyone in here does.
All right. And then we all have a copy of the cities. I would like to have Adam make up a score sheet off of the original, this list, his list, and then we could take that and then read these and score these. If we don't think this is important on their list, or it's already being done, just mark it off as far as scoring. And the other things that we could bring up and score the ones that we think are important on Mark's list on this list that need to have more input. Is that understandable or not? I think it'd be simpler for them to make up one score sheet off of this sheet and then us score it using your sheet and these together, looking at them and see, well, that don't match, we won't do that. And does that make sense to everybody? I guess it doesn't.
Well, it seems
That's clear as mud,
Mark is trying to wordsmith a little bit more.
Well, hit your button.
From the document, I'm sorry. It appears, maybe I'm trying to interpret, I think it's unfortunate when we bring documents to the meeting that we haven't had a chance to review. And this happened last meeting, it's happened this meeting, and I think that's very unfortunate. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. I think Mark has tried to wordsmith the other document to clarify what he views needs to be emphasized. I don't think that there's a conflict in the two documents. I think it's a matter of wording. I think the concepts are embedded in both documents. It's just Mark is trying to clarify with more language, whereas the first document is one sentence, where Mark has made a paragraph. That I don't sense that and we can make a paragraph for a lot of more of all the dot points if we wanted to, but I don't know how we mesh the two together, Mark. Unless you think that there's something that is actually missing in the apparently you feel that there's something missing in concept in the original document.
Yes.
Is that your concern?
Yes. Rates. Rate setting process. It's hidden under number 8 in the 5th bullet under number 8.
Okay, it's there, but you don't think is it? You think it's there, but it's just not defined the way you want it defined?
Just like the bondurant. Bondurant is
No, let's not get off.
same thing. Look at where they put the bondurant. It's under number 8.
It's simply the order that they're in. And if you read Mark's and you don't agree with it, you think it's fine, then you approve, rate the other one. But we only need one sheet to score, I think. But use Mark's for us to help score it. If you agree that this ought to be higher, like he's got the Bondurant decision, the government thing, number 1, if you agree, then give it a 4 or 5 or whatever it is on your score sheet.
But Jim's isn't in order.
No.
Jim didn't intend to have 8 to be the priority.
Excuse me?
Jim's sheet didn't intend to be in priority order. 8 isn't intended to be the priority.
The priority's up to you all.
Rank them.
The priority's up to us. And that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. We go off his original sheet, but use Mark's to help us to rate them.
For a clarification, could we rank them 1 through 9? That way we put the ones that we think are the least at 9, the ones we think are the highest priorities at 1, and make sure perhaps it's 1 through 10, and rate setting is on there as one of those within that. Would that allow us to at least proceed? Because the 3 dots and 4 dots is going to be really tough since people are looking at a variety of things.
I thought that was what the score sheet would do. Then they could print it towards and bring us to our meeting on the 19th.
I worry about trying to, each one of you all prioritizing this list separately, 1 through 9, and then we'd have to, and maybe it's possible, I'm just trying to put this in my head how this would work. So it would be, the priority or the item here that was ranked number 1 the most is the highest priority, and the one that got the second priority will get, that's why I'm suggesting we give you 4 or 5 points or 3 to 5 points, and you assign a number. You want to assign, for instance, Mark may want to assign 3 of his 4 points to the governance and reporting process. So then that would automatically have 3 or 4 points. And then if someone else adds to that, they may end up with 20 points, and the next item may have 15 points.
Well, in the same respect, some of them are going to have the same amount of points. You know,
Correct.
I mean, you're going to come up with a priority list, but some of them, as we all know on here, are already being done, so they're not really on the list.
And I just want to make sure that everybody knows this is a PUAB process.
Yeah.
This really isn't a city staff process or an IPL process. With all due respect, I do appreciate the work that has been done, but the emphasis on the particular items is missing. And if you can incorporate my level of significance for the Bondurant case and the developing a rate setting and cost reduction, I'm great with whatever. But the way it is in current form right now is not acceptable for me.
I think the Bondurant is on the list already. It's there.
It's on the list, but it's not at the top.
It's listed on number 8.
Help, Adam.
All right. What I would suggest, sir, is let's start with the rate setting item, okay? So if you would just, my suggestion here, your process, right?
Exactly.
And again, I'm just here to provide suggestions for you all, okay?
Yes.
I'm not, my intent here, and neither is Jim's, is to drive this thing. We're supporting here. So are you suggesting we add a bullet in number 5 to say rate setting process, or do you want to add something? Maybe I would suggest you propose additional language to this document to capture what you want.
I did.
Okay.
This is the language I want in there for rate setting, the language I want in there for the clarifying governance and reporting processes. Maybe we should just take a vote. Is this what we want to do, or is it not what we want to do? Because I think this is very simple.
Are you saying that we don't do this, that we don't do the one that was presented to us, that we had time to review?
I think we can review whatever you want to review.
No, are you recommending that we only go with yours and not go with this one? I'm just asking.
Yes.
Point of order, we have a motion on the floor and seconded. I either need to have a vote or remove the motion.
That's right.
Okay, what is
Can
the
you
motion?
restate the motion?
David?
God, I've already forgotten. You guys are killing me back here.
Well, I believe originally you were going to make a spreadsheet.
I'm gonna pull that motion. And you seconded?
Yes.
You wanna kill it too?
Yes.
All right, let's kill it.
All right, now, would you like to make a new motion, Mark?
Excuse me?
Would you want to make a motion on what you said just a while ago?
I don't know what we want to do as a group, because it's clear this was not a document. This is something that, in all due respect, that Mr. Nail took and paraphrased what we submitted. And the issue is, and I mentioned it at our meeting, I mentioned at our meeting the other day, that Bondurant wasn't even included until the meeting the other day. And I read what you sent out to us, and I said the significance of each one of those needs to be increased. And I see, for me, these are the priorities for advising the city council on what needs to be worked on at IPL. So that's basically where I'm at. Some of the things that were in your paraphrasing, I left in there. You saw that. But the Bondurant, it's got to get taken care of, and we've been dinking around with it for way too long.
I guess what I hear Mark proposing is he has presented the priorities, and he's asking us to accept his priorities. I thought we were here as a group to develop the priorities. I thought the purpose of this meeting was for a group process to develop the priorities, as opposed to one member developing the priorities for us to agree to. So I'm confused why we are going to change the agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we accept what I submitted for the priorities for this project.
Second?
Motion been made and seconded. Any more discussion?
I'd like to speak against that because the other people who recommended prior items are not included in Mark's priorities. We all had opportunity to submit ideas for priorities. Mark chose not to include my ideas and other people's ideas. He only included his own ideas. I think that's very unfortunate for this committee to only accept the ideas of one individual and ignore everybody else's ideas. I think the process that we agreed to last time was that IPL would take all of the ideas, both from IPL and from all the ideas submitted by each individual, and incorporate those into a single document. And then we as a group would develop the priorities. That's what we have been trying to work through as a group today. The motion on the table is to do just the opposite of what we have been here for the last hour and a half. That is subjugating what we have been, the purpose of this meeting. That is not what this meeting was called to do. That's not the agenda of this meeting. And I think it's out of order. So I call for this motion to be out of order.
Is that out of order, Sherry?
I don't think that's a real motion. So we have a motion on the floor. It's been seconded. I think that the board just needs to address which priority list they want to go with at this point.
Since we're still talking
we're
about
still
the
discussion.
motion, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
you can see a lot of the city's ideas in Mark's list. However, Mark's list is more in line with my thinking. And if there's something on there that Mr. Land would like to add to that list, I think now would be a great time to do it. But I for one, I like this. I think this is a good document, and it comes from us, and I'm still gonna support it.
For point of clarification,
Yeah. Go ahead.
is there the opportunity to take Mr. McDonald's priorities, but I still feel like I didn't get the time in advance of the meeting to really sit down and read it carefully like I would for the materials that I came prepared to discuss, which was the document, the shared document. So that's one concern I have. And I will go home and do my homework and read it carefully and make sure that I agree or disagree with language. Language matters. And I think we need to be thoughtful that should be language that represents a variety of perspectives and not just a single. But if this was based on the document that we did as shared work, why would we not vote and rank the ones that we have that we did together? Perhaps we end up using the language that Mr. McDonald supplied for those after the ranking is done. That way you get the best of both sets of thinking.
Any more discussion?
Yeah.
Additional comment, yes, sir, Jack Looney here.
Jack?
Jack doesn't see.
Just trying to look at it from up above. Mark, we all had an opportunity to do input, and that's shown in the 9 categories on the attachment to the agenda today. It kind of supports the last speaker's comments. Mark condensed and emphasized many that he thought were important, which was good. However, there are others that felt like that it left out some things that they had related on the 9-item list. Now, I agree with taking the 9-item list, working it into priorities. The 1 through 9 listing is meaningless. It's just a different category. They're not priorities. So we could take all of our thoughts from that list and develop and rate them and develop a new priority list. That's it for me.
Thank you, Jeff. Any other for discussion?
Yeah, the question was raised about what was missing from Mark's list. Number 1 is missing. FERC is missing. I mean, that's one of the most important things that was mentioned earlier, that we lost $2.5 million because we didn't have FERC standards. That's missing from Mark's list. City Works is missing from Mark's list. That was mentioned earlier, that we were, from a management point of view, we're not using City Works. That's missing from Mark's list. The whole issue in terms of the Ibew is missing from Mark's list. I mean, you can go through all of this, and there's big gaps that are not in Mark's list. So I think we need to realize that if we're going just with Mark's list, a lot of content that was being recommended by individuals on this PUAB is being left out.
I think some of those are
What was that
actually
last
on
comment?
Huh?
What was that last comment?
A lot of the recommendations were made by PUAB members are being left out if we want to go with your list.
Bridget? Bridget, do you have something?
Yeah, I think actually some of those things were on your list. They're just, it's hard for us to compare the two. Like your FERC accounting is here under number 5 on development future leadership models. So some of those things were included. It's just hard to move between the two documents without time to compare.
So maybe we prioritize both of them.
Well, that's my comment is we've got a motion on the floor to accept Mark's list, and we can vote on that. And we can also have another motion to accept IPL list and vote on that.
Well, I think we've been standing around, we've all been sitting for an hour and a half, and we were going nowhere.
Yeah, exactly.
And I made the motion to just accept mine to get us off the dime because we're not making a decision. I don't agree with the city's position that we just use the 9. If we want to somehow incorporate the 2 or score the 2, that's what I've been in favor of since day one. When I met with Adam and Mr. Nail, if you remember, I said we need to have a way to score these things. And then we met again. I was invited to a meeting with Mr. Porter and Adam and Mr. Nail, and I said then, I even gave them a spreadsheet that showed everybody's name. We could have all the lists, and we could all score them out, how they come out. That is the objective way to do it. But simply accepting the product of the IPL manager, is not a PUAB list. And when there's some things that need to be more emphasized that may not be in the, maybe uncomfortable for IPL or the city, we seem to have left those in very obscure places. So I'm all in favor with scoring this thing if we have the option of having the items that I have highlighted as well as what was on the list of 9. Does that clarify it all?
That does to me, and as I said before, and I'm going to ask a question, Adam, if we accept both of these, can you give me a score sheet on each one to bring to the next meeting?
So would the idea be to score each one of these documents separately?
Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose so. You just
Well,
have two different.
we're going to sit here and discuss more, and we'll be discussing them next meeting at the regular meeting. And we got other people coming to the regular meeting on water and public works. We're going to have to do something, and I think we should score both of them. If everybody would score them.
Do I need to withdraw my motion?
Whose dog's barking?
Jack's vote says yes.
Jack, shut your dog up.
Do I need to withdraw my motion?
Yeah, if you'd like.
I'd like to withdraw my motion, and then are you going to make the next? Who's going to make the
I
next?
can't
motion?
make a motion. I'm chair.
I'll make the motion that the documents, as they are written, are put together, and we as individuals will score them out so that we can objectively have a picture of what our priority listing is from the PUAB perspective.
Is there the possibility of having a second meeting that's just this discussion as opposed to in a regular business meeting? Because it feels like we're gonna have more to talk about.
Mr. Chairman, I second that.
Oh,
Now go
excuse
ahead.
me.
Go ahead.
That was mine. I know you want to move this along, but I think this is a 5-year plan.
This is Thursday, and next meeting is the 19th, and the only time for a meeting is Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. I'm busy Monday and Tuesday, so I
Does it have to be done before the next meeting?
we have to get it done soon. It's something that's the priority. We need to get this done.
Mr. Chairman, if we could all individually score these at our homes and bring that score sheet in here that could be tabulated while we're having our meeting on other issues, then we could, have that tabulation given to us so we could then see what everybody here agrees on. And
Go ahead.
all right, what I'm saying is, if we get that spreadsheet done, sent out to everybody, when we walk into this room, everyone should have their spreadsheet completed. Print it out, mark it down, give it to our secretary, let her tabulate the votes while our regular meeting's going on, and we should have a result by the end of the meeting.
I told you didn't get paid enough, Christine. I think we could bring it to our meeting, and we could start out with water and public works and get them out of the way, and then go to power and light and discuss it all. Because I don't think we'll have that much from water and public works. Is that a motion? We have a motion on
We
that.
have a motion on the floor already.
We got a second.
I second it.
All right, can I just ask a methodological question?
Yeah,
So we've got 9 on
hit
the
your
one.
button.
I'm sorry. We've got 9 on the one, and we've got 6 on the other. Are we scoring 15? Are we scoring 9 and 6?
You're scoring 2 sheets, 1 9 and 1 6.
Okay,
Then how do you put them
we're
together?
scoring them separately.
We'll put them together at our meeting on the 19th.
Do you want, but they're still gonna have to be 1 through 15.
Yeah, you're going to have to. I would say you're scoring 1 through 15.
Yeah.
Well, how are you scoring one? Okay,
Yeah, it's gonna have to be together.
all right, we're scoring 1 through 15.
Yeah, because some of them are gonna be
Right.
overlapping,
Yeah.
but we need to see, I guess my point is the emphasis.
Okay, can I have a vote?
Can I ask one quick question?
Yeah,
If we're scoring 15 off of both of these lists together, 15, there's so many that are similar or exactly the same. What are we gonna do when we get one here,
It should
and
score,
different priorities?
it should score out.
If you think it's,
So you could have the
if it's
same-
very important, you would make it a 15, And if you thought it wasn't very important at all, it should go down to like
If
a
you're
1.
scoring the same objective or goal, whatever it is, twice, priority twice, you're gonna get one number for one number from another.
We'll have to,
Total, grand total.
we'll have to,
But you would rank them together, so if there's rate setting on yours and rate setting on the others, they for me would be 8 and 9, so that they would cluster. I think you'll find that they shake out pretty well.
I think it will too.
And is 1 the highest priority or the lowest priority?
Be 15
Some
would be
will
your
send
high.
directions when they send us a spreadsheet, that will be fine.
15 should be your high, 1 should be your low.
Okay, 15 is a high.
Yes.
Okay.
Call for vote?
Do I have a question yet?
Yes. I'm
Question
listening,
actually
Jack.
for Christina. I'm thinking with our technology today, we could receive a interactive score sheet and we could score on, send it back, and she could have it tabulated and ready for us, rather than spending that time pulling those numbers together during the meeting.
Good idea.
Yeah, Christine's not.
Could you do that, Christine?
You're asking if for us to send out the score sheet to everyone, but they would all have to respond individually, directly to me, not to all, and then I could tabulate it that way?
Yeah.
Have it ready by 4 o'clock.
We want it done yesterday.
So you're taking the one list, just adding the other list to it, and you're telling us that the highest priority is number 15, and the lowest priority is 1.
Yes.
You can add another bullet on there, Christine needs a raise.
What do you think, Christine? Can you do that?
Will this be anonymous?
I'll let them answer the
So-
question, but.
Can she do that?
So if we get that list to you in, short order within the next 24 hours, I mean, shouldn't take long to combine these things. What I would suggest is it's returned to us by Wednesday at noon.
By when?
Wednesday at noon, and then that would give us sufficient time because during the Christina doing that during the meeting probably isn't.
Right. We'll get it back to you before Wednesday.
Yeah, so do it at noon. We'll have the sheet ready for you by the meeting on Thursday. Okay?
Can I call a roll for a vote now?
Larry Porter,
Yes.
Jack Looney,
Yes.
Garland Land,
Yes.
Jozak,
Yes.
Mark McDonald,
Yes.
David McDowell,
Yes.
Bridget McCandless.
Yes.
Good Lord, all that a concession and you get a unanimous vote. Any other comments? We are adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Porter. You've done a good meeting.